Our speakers love hearing from you and comparing experiences. A big theme of our conversations together have centered around the importance of building trust amongst your audiences and how marketers need to display the brand's genuine effort in showing up for communities whom it represents. So how do you put that into practice, and what are the risks and the outcomes if you get it wrong? Well, joining me on stage to close us out and share her thought leadership on that and a whole lot more is Denise Bennett, Vice President of Brand Strategy and the Idea Lab at iHeartMedia. Hello, Denise. I can't wait to get into this with you. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. Now, I know you have some slides and a bit of a presentation to get into, but just first off, the title of your presentation kind of perked my interest there about leading with intention. What do you mean by that?
So I want to talk about how we are creating consumer connections and building trust, which is very hard to get and easy to lose when you don't lead with thoughtful intention. So I want to have a specific lens on what I do in my day-to-day life, which is focusing on multicultural consumers, and delve into some of those best practices to show up for this target demo where it counts in order to drive our consumer loyalty.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I can't wait to get a bit more insight into how you put that into practice as a leader yourself. Before I get your slides up and leave you to it, I know we just ran this audience poll. I have to be honest, I've never been more intrigued by what the results of a poll will be. So I just want to dig into this with you, if you'd be so kind. Producers, are you okay to flash up the results of the poll that we just ran there? So we asked, where do you feel brands are going wrong in building authentic connections with diverse audiences? The biggest chunk thought it was about inclusivity as a box ticking exercise. And of course, that inevitably lends itself to a sense of othering that's continually perpetrated. Lack of internal representation being clear also features, and then a one size blanket approach as well. Denise, I'm so intrigued. What do you make of those results there?
I think some of them may have took a peek at what I was getting ready to say, because they hit a lot of my notes already, and those are great thoughts to show that folks are thinking in the right way about how to approach leading with intention.
All right. Well, with that, I'll ask the producers to get your slides up, because I can't wait to get into the insight that you've come here to offer us today.
Thank you so much. So let's get into it. So how do you connect with all of your consumers in a way that turns them from a passive consumer into a brand loyalist? Well, that depends on how well you take the time to know them and build their trust in you. Do you understand them beyond just the basic level of serving their consumer need? Meaning, do you understand who they are, their cultural nuances, their language, their life stages, and how who they are impacts what and how they consume in order to create experiences with their whole selves in mind? As the Vice President of Brand Strategy and Idea Lab at iHeartMedia, I spend my days developing solutions and ideas for brands who want to reach a multicultural, namely a Black and Latino audience, across our various audio, digital, social, and experiential platforms. So the words authenticity and trust, that's a part of my daily lexicon as I and my team identify ways to create those experiences that engage and make an impact with our audiences. At iHeart, we work in tandem with our brand partners to put our listener first in terms of understanding who they are and striving to lead with authenticity and intention to retain their trust in us as a media company and the trust of our brand partners. We have very honest conversations about who we're talking to and about what we're saying to them and how we're saying it to make sure that we're showing up in the right way to drive impact and results. So as multicultural consumers in general have gotten way more savvier about how they spend their money and their time, it's become increasingly imperative for us as marketers to step our game up if we want their dollar. So no longer content with us coming with one size fits all ways in, they want us to earn it through a clear demonstration that we want them. Before, the go-to moves were to cast a broad consumer message, and whoever caught it bought it, until they didn't. Consumers got smarter, and they wanted to feel a connection with the brands that they were spending their money on. So not only did those generic messages fall flat with certain consumers, those consumers started getting vocal with both their voices and their wallets when they felt that certain brands just weren't for them. So I want us to help each other in understanding those best practices and learnings to build that trust and present ourselves authentically to our consumers. So how do we do that? Intentionality. Consumer trust, it takes a while to build, but it can be lost very quickly and costly if we lean on the performative versus the genuine, intentional engagement. So if you're going to do it right. If your goal is to reach a specific audience, you need to be intentional about what that means. If you're talking multicultural, do you mean Black or Hispanic? Say that. Do you know why you want to reach this audience? Is it because your research has shown that they are heavy users of your brand? Do you see them as an untapped demographic that you want to pursue? Whatever it is, be clear on your why and move with intention to your how and your what. With that intentionality comes an intellectual curiosity. You have to put in the work beyond just the research data to truly understand this audience. Tap into the media that they're consuming, the podcasts, the radio shows, all the mediums where they are over-indexing and spending their time. Get a sense of the topics and tone that they're listening to better understand their environment. You can't speak to this audience if you don't know what they're talking about. And listen to various voices and influencers, because these audiences are not monolithic and neither are the people that they listen to. On the Black Effect Podcast Network, the Earn Your Leisure podcast is a totally different vibe than Reasonably Shady. But it's important to hear those conversations to know what voices impact your target audience on a regular basis. This country is made up of millions of people. And as a country, we have unique norms, but there are some very important differences in our consumer behavior attributed to our different identities that, while not monolithic, these behaviors are notable in how they move markets. So in order to build that consumer trust and present your brand as genuine to your audience, you've got to take the time to be curious enough to go beyond the what the consumer consumes, but the why. Some consumer behavior and brand loyalty, it's been passed down for generations. So going deeper into the history, psychology, and culture that comprises consumer behavior goes a long way in determining how you approach them to do what you want. So the next thing is representation. Again, part of this leading with intention is in establishing trust and driving authenticity with your consumers is having the representation of the right people in the room when you're making these decisions. While diversity, equity, and inclusion and multicultural marketing are two different things, they significantly impact each other as it relates to the authenticity, insights, and instincts that are included in the development of your brand solutions. Consumers have gotten smarter about asking the right questions when they see targeted messages towards them. They want to know who was in the room where it happened and whether they are representative of the culture or possess the cultural competency to drive authentic consumer messaging with thoughtfulness and respect. Representation matters for your teams, for your brand, and to your consumers. And not just one, various voices from various vantage points. Being intentional about who is in the room and at the table with a voice goes a long way to building and retaining trust in your consumers. Now, this last one A major way to build consumer trust and authenticity is to show up. Show up for the things that your targeted audience cares about and let them know that you stand with them. Whether it is responding to feedback specifically related to your brand or aligning yourself with the external issues that directly impact them or their community in a way that is true to their culture and nuances. Now, this one gets tricky for all targeted audiences, because at times when those issues delve into the social justice or even political, you run the risk of alienating other parts of your consumer base. And that's when you have to make some choices about if you only want their rhythm, AKA their dollar, but not their blues, AKA their problems. But understand that your brand actions or lack thereof directly impact the trust levels of the audience you claim to value. But an important note on showing up. That doesn't mean showing up to save the day. A common default stance is to position your brand as a savior to your targeted audience through activations or even just the language that positions this audience as less than. This runs the risk of damaging the trust from this audience because it positions them as recipients of your pity versus your partnership. So your goal is to stand with them in solidarity and provide solutions that still center in authenticity and, most importantly, with respect. And one last tip: don't just show up at your convenience. Now, Black History Month and Hispanic Heritage Month, they're very convenient times to show your commitment and affinity towards specific demographics. But I like to say I'm just as Black in August as I am in February, and I still have the same consumer, psychological, and solidarity needs. So now what do we do with this information? Trust and authenticity continues to be so much of our goals as we want to engage with our consumers, but we've got to do the work. Most of us have dedicated research teams that can help do some of the legwork in identifying trends and competitive actions that can aid in our overall learning and concept development. Throughout your research efforts, you'll stumble across data that leans on both the anecdotal and the empirical, where you can build your arsenal of insights to drive your concepting and your conversations as you shape directional strategies. But there will always come a point where the insights end and the instincts in human consumer behavior kicks in. Our consumers are going to continuously evolve. And it's our job to commit to being intentional, incorporating the right representation of voices and decision makers in the room, and commit to showing up, not as a savior, but as a partner to your audience in a way that authentically resonates with them to establish trust and, of course, ultimately some literal buy-in. Authenticity and intentionality doesn't have to be complicated, but it does need to be thoughtful if you do want to connect with your audience, build their trust, and drive results. So thank you for this opportunity to share these thoughts with you. And I believe Julia is going to come back for some Q&A with the audience.
I am definitely going to come back to you with some questions. Denise, thank you so much for sharing your thought leadership on that. Fascinating. And, you know, such simple slides, and yet you really painted such a colourful picture with those comments. I'd love to just get some specifics from you. You know, you've talked about how it's important to be thoughtful. It's important to be a genuine, authentic ally, just not, you know, in a really cringy timeframe that suits a fad, for instance. Do you have a case study or a scenario that emulates this topic of leading with intention, perhaps from your own career or experience, or perhaps from what you've seen from a brand doing it well?
You know, that's a good one. One that jumps into my mind right now, just because we've actually been talking about it recently. What we did earlier this year, we had a partnership with AT&T Dream in Black and one of our signature programs, Living Black. And the process of working with this brand and the back and forth conversations that we had about really looking to lead with intention and authenticity with the voices that we use, the talent that we highlighted, And this the way that we centered around some of their key pillars, as well as our priorities and how we were talking to our audience in this celebration of culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we were really happy with the partnership together. And we look to have those open conversations with our brands as we are looking towards these solutions of how to engage with our audience in the most authentic and genuine ways.
Yeah. And open conversations is such a key point to this. Hang on, I don't want to lose my train of thought. I will invite our audience, of course, please. If you do have questions or comments, pop those in the chat. Carl can bring you up and we can facilitate that so you can directly chat to Denise. But having those open conversations requires that sense of humility from leadership. So do you have any thoughts or any guidance in terms of managing up, if you're not necessarily at that absolute top level, to encourage this need to lead with intent and authenticity? How can you have those at times awkward and accountable conversations?
I'm glad that you noted that. Sometimes they can be awkward. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of doing that work, and when I talked about that intellectual curiosity, you need to ask questions and be willing to be wrong. People are going to get it wrong a lot, but you are not going to know unless you ask. Now, before you start making people do a lot of emotional labor to answer your questions, do some of that legwork on yourself, with yourself, to identify, again, when I talk about some of the history and the psychology of specific targeted consumer behavior, but then ask questions and, again, allow yourself to be wrong, dust yourself off and try again.
Mm-hmm. And do you mean that in terms of an internal open dialogue as well as a public one? A big key theme, Denise, throughout this summit has been the harshness of social media. And if a brand gets it wrong, goodbye. So how can we execute that humility outwardly within the social media landscape? And where do you think, you are entitled to go wrong and claw it back? And where do you think you ought to be much more careful?
Well, what we want to do as we're talking to us as marketers, we are making those decisions before we get to our external before they've gone to the consumer. Yeah. So this is our work that we are doing amongst each other. And that's why I talk about be intentional about the people in the room where it happens. So hammer those things out before they get to don't let it get to the part where the consumer is telling you that you were wrong. Hammer that out internally, both within your own internal segments, or whether we are talking and working things out with a brand. Make sure you've got some folks in the room that say, I don't think we should do that. Mm-hmm. I think we should think about that a little bit more. And again, you want to have various voices in the room. I am one person. I cannot speak to my entire culture. Mm-hmm. So you want to have some various voices to get those different vantage points. My Black experience is totally different than someone else's. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make either one of them less or greater than. They're just different.
Yeah. And that speaks to, and we did that poll and it kind of nicely outlined lots of those barriers. And one of them was internal representation. If you don't have those people in the room, you're definitely not going to know what that audience that correlates with that community would even want or relate to. But one of those things that you kind of touched on in your presentation was this piece about the blind spot. About if you just don't know what you don't know, how can you possibly, get further down this path of intentionality? You talked about intellectual curiosity. You've touched on representation. And then, of course, you've talked about really digging into the areas in which various communities spend lots of time, be it the podcasts or be it social media pages, whatever. Have you got any more advice for how, if people are just hemmed in within their own echo chamber, how they can branch out and really understand what is, at the end of the day, potential demographics and audiences that they ought to be speaking to?
I mean, it really does come down to listen to the voices that are talking to this audience that you want to speak to. Mm-hmm. I just saw Angela Yee from the Breakfast Club, and soon to be her new show within iHeart. She was just talking at AudioCon about how she starts listening to everything that's happening around that her audience is experiencing, whether the news that they're listening to, any of the music they're listening to. She wants to know, what are they talking about? Because it helps her map out how she's speaking to them. And so if you want to know if you want to get a kind of a sense of what your targeted audience is into, listen to the things that they're listening to, and you'll hear it.
Yeah.
Start to hear some of the tone, start to hear what is popular with them. That's one of the best ways that you can do, that you can have that expression of that intellectual curiosity. Go sit and hear them.
Yeah.
And if that is different than what you are normally doing, that is okay. You know, that's how you help yourself get out of that echo chamber of your own self. So you get to hear what are some of the most authentic ways in to engage with these audiences.
And that, like an immersive sense of research, if you really are lacking it and at least you've got the intellectual curiosity to know that you have some blind spots, then that would be a really interesting and tangible takeaway, Denise. Thank you. If there's folks in the delegation who perhaps recognise that there is ultimately a lack of representation, so if people don't have seats at the table, how on earth can they make impactful rolling out decisions? What would be your advice, not in terms of just creating opportunities for diversity and inclusion, but also for making your workplace an appealing place to work for different communities? Because it's not just about you putting the space there, it's about, do people even want to work there? And that's been such a key part of this summit, is how much employee satisfaction and employee representation rolls out and affects customer experience. What would your thoughts be on that?
Again, it goes back into whom do you have in the room that has the power and the agency to actually be have a voice and be a part of that decision making. So you don't want them in there just as a figurehead, or unfortunately as a token. You want them to be able to have that agency and power to speak, and that you are taking their insights and instinct into account as you are thinking through how to reach these demographics. But again, you want to expand beyond more than just one person. That's a lot of emotional labor to put on one person. You want to be able to have varying voices in the room. And as you continue to have those varying voices in the room and they continue to be able to opine and impact some of that decision making, that is what drives a great place to work, because you feel like you are making an impact and you feel like your voice is heard. Right.
I want to end things on like a peak and a pit. I saw them doing this on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and I quite liked it. They talk about a peak and a pit. I wonder, for you, from your position and your experience, what is something that you see lots of brands falling into traps on? What makes you go, oh, for goodness sake, that screams inauthentic? And then what is something that gets you really excited about this space, and you can see massive progress and you can see real pioneering leadership? You can take them in whichever order you like, but I recommend going for the neggy one first.
Well, I note about it when I just spoke, when sometimes you see the defaults of coming in as the savior, because again, that positions your brand, your audience, as less than, and no one wants to feel like they are a recipient of pity. But I think when you have brands that are thinking very thoughtfully of, they want to contribute to a community versus uplift, support, like they are, again, being a savior. That's where I think there's some learning and where that can be improved. Right. What I love is when I see brands that center around joy and really delve into some of the very positive and cultural aspects of nuanced cultural aspects of different demographics. When I, as a consumer, and of course myself as a marketer, when I get to show the consumers that, yes, we get you, we heard you, we see you, we are a part of you, we represent the culture as well, and we're here with you. We're just as excited about bringing these campaigns and messages to you as you are to receive them. That's where it's fun.
Yeah, and that's when it feels, again, like a human-to-human connection, which is ultimately really what this is all about. Denise, I took so much away from that presentation. I really appreciate your thought leadership and you taking the time to share on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Oh, thank you again to Denise. What a wonderful note to close on. Thank you as well to all of our speakers this week, and to you for watching, for connecting in the chat, for asking questions on stage, and for being a part of this experience. Purpose, values, technology, talent, culture, leadership, change. The past, the present, the future. We've touched on all of it, and what a journey it has been. Customer expectations are evolving and changing at breakneck speed, and it's been fascinating to hear how you're all transforming in order to keep up with, and in some cases even get out in front of, that change. Our post-event portal will provide you with all the insights and information from this summit, plus access to the connections you've made and a recap of everything you've experienced, all with the aim of helping you to continue these conversations, including all of your brilliant one-to-one meetings moving forwards. We want this summit to be a springboard for your future success, so hopefully the relationships you formed here this week will stand you in good stead for that. Speaking of which, we will continue with your personalized programs of meetings this afternoon, so please do check your individual agendas for the latest scheduling information. There is still so much to look forward to. And if you'd like to join us at our next event, then please do let us know in the summit feedback call. We'll be back, I believe, in early 2023, around February. Many thanks for being a part of a wonderful few days here. It's been a real pleasure hosting you all. Big props to GDS's Jo Wiley, our Summit Director, for her world-class execution of this event. What a lineup of speakers, Jo. Thank you. Well done. Carl, you're a legend. You've been in my ear putting up with me this week. Thank you. Emma's been running the tech. Kat, Ryan and Matt have been working so hard in the gallery. I've been Julia Bell, and from the entire GDS Summit team, stay safe. Best of luck with your respective business journeys, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Goodbye.